I'll choose the eastward facing road. I'll turn my eyes and free to breathe low.
Hello, this is Julie Hume. I'm here with Heartland Song Network, and we're talking today with our October Artist of the Month, Mr. Sam Wright from Mission, Kansas. Sam is a local songwriter, singer, performer, actor, and playwright, and he's here to talk to us today about his career and to talk to us a little bit about his process in songwriting. Welcome, Sam. It's good to have you here.
Hi, Julie. Thank you so much.
Well, Sam, I'm going to dive right in and talk with you a bit about an exciting project that you've got going on right now, something that's really kind of snowballing. And I understand this spring it's going to hit kind of the big thing, and you've
We'll
got
see.
the summer plans and everything. Okay, well, tell us about it.
Well, I think you're referring to American Pride. It is a modern American gender-swapped folk musical take on Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. I've been working with a director who lives in the UK. His name is Nicholas Collett. And 2017, his wife Lorraine had the brilliant idea that Nick and I should create a folk musical based on Pride and Prejudice. So when we all settled into our pandemic modes, I got to work. I had written a couple of songs for it already, but I just determined that I was going to punch that thing out. And so I ended up writing like 15 songs, and Nick put together the bones of the script. And then I came in behind him and filled in some dialogue. And last August 28th, we went to the Black Box Theater down in the West Bottoms, and we did a live script in hand reading of that show.
Well, that is very exciting. I am a devoted Janeite, and I'm very excited about this. I think it's a wonderful idea. I think I've seen about every different kind of adaptation of this. I saw the Bollywood adaptation, which I just loved, Bride and Prejudice. I haven't seen the zombie movie. I will admit, but you know, I do think that you're going to find a huge amount of interest in this. How does a male relate to some of the themes of Pride and Prejudice? When I look at it, I very much see it through a woman's eyes, and I'm just wondering, when you're talking about the gender swapping, what was some of the process he went through to kind of do that? That's interesting to me.
You know, I first told a female friend of mine this idea that I was going to write a folk musical about Pride and Prejudice. And their immediate response was, "Oh, you're going to need a woman to help you write that." And that comment really stuck in my head, and maybe not the most pleasant of ways at first. And I kept thinking to myself, man, if if a woman playwright went to their male friend and said, I'm going to write a new version of Moby Dick. And they said, well, you're going to need a man to help you write that. Like, would we as a culture be okay with that right now? And so that idea of gender swapping things to check to see if there's, bias or prejudice going on there, kind of crept in right at the beginning of the show. And I looked at, what we're kind of doing in our culture right now with discussing what gender roles are within relationships, within families, within society. And just started wondering, well, okay, like if you took a story that's traditionally about women, for women, targeted at women, and you flipped everything to men, would it still read? Would it still make sense? Would you still understand those characters? And so this is the idea to gender swap. It was very much kind of my contribution to the story.
Uh-huh. And so
And
tell us a little bit about the character then. I suppose I unfortunately missed your big read that you had at the Black Box, but I assume then that you are playing Elizabeth Bennet reimagined here.
yes, we had fun renaming the characters. So Elizabeth Bennet turned into Bennett Longbourn,
Oh, okay.
and then
Okay.
all the
And
other
that's the home they used to live in. Yes, in the
yes,
yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So then the rest of the family has Longbourn as a last name, and then we have variations on their original character name, like Jane Bennett turns to Jake Longbourn, and Lydia Bennett turns to Lyle Longbourn.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And then, Mr. Darcy was the easiest because we just flipped their name backwards, so it
Oh,
became
okay.
Darcy Fitzwilliams.
Okay. Okay. And tell me about the setting of this then. Where does this take place?
We chose to place it in the hills of eastern Tennessee in a made up place called Longbourn Hollow.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good
And that
call. I like
was,
that.
yeah, that was like the modern American equivalent of what Herefordshire would be like 200 years ago.
Uh-huh. Your character, um, what what is he doing in this? Does is he a coal miner? Is what is his
Well,
role here?
strangely enough, they say you should write what you know. So I made the character a banjo player.
All right.
I decided that Bennett would be much like Elizabeth Bennett in the original, that Bennett Longbourn would be a little out of step with the culture around him. That instead of being a coal miner like perhaps his father, and I always imagine his big brother works in the coal mines,
Uh-huh.
uh, but he's decided a different path, an offbeat path, and that kind of iconoclasm sort of chases him around the show, I think.
One of the biggest challenges that Jane Austen, of course, met in her life was really feeling like she was out of step, as you're saying, where she did not fit in, and she was so very frustrated with what was expected of her from society. Is that something that you personally could relate to a lot? Was that a way into the character?
uh it wasn't so much that I was frustrated with what society expected of me. It was that I was frustrated with my opportunity to achieve what society expected of me.
Uh-huh.
So I really identify with that sense of, just some hole in the wall, nowhere town, where there's not a lot of opportunities, and the possibilities for a young man in such a position just seem to be shrinking by the moment. That's a very real case for a
I was
lot of
gonna
people
say
around
that's
the
very
country right now.
topical right now, isn't that? That's very topical. It's really interesting looking at, if you just look at things that are in the news lately about the number of white males, for example, that are going to college now, and how that is really on the, now I think the latest numbers are that college populations are 60% women and 40% men. There's this wild thing kind of going on, so it's a really really good time to be doing that gender swap. It seems like you're
Yeah, I mean,
on the cusp of a trend here.
well, we came out of a very long, centuries long period where women's voices were marginalized, and now as at least a national culture, we're starting to reach out and highlight women's voices, look at women in positions of power, in storytelling, all sorts of elevation of the woman's position in our culture.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's easy for men who have been at the top for so long to see that and start to feel anxious, to feel like maybe that trend will leave them out, or maybe they will become marginalized like they did to women for so long.
Yeah, yeah. Not they personally. That's the part of it, though. That's always the rub. Not that they personally did to women, the people that came before them. And so,
Yeah.
So that's sort of the rub when you're a young man, because you know, you're not necessarily looking at all the privilege you had. It's maybe the privilege that your grandpa had, and so it
You
doesn't
know,
make it.
I had a very unique experience of privilege growing up. When I was very small, my parents moved to Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you know about the demographics there, but I feel like the city's about 90% Black.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
was very much like in a minority position.
Yeah.
Among my peers at school, everywhere, I was kind of like the token white kid.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and I felt a certain stigma around that, at least in a local sense. But you know what? I never feared to step out of my house or engage with a police officer. So even then, I was still benefiting from the
Yeah.
privileges that were handed to me,
Yeah.
just maybe not quite as much as before.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Interesting point there. Well, Sam, one thing I want to ask as a fellow songwriter, one of the things that we do when we're writing songs is we consult our own experiences and we consult our own feelings. How does that change when you're writing for a play and you're no longer, you know, writing this is Sam Wright's life and this is what's going on, but you have to write for all these characters and write that point of view? How does that change, and what is your process with that?
Well, there's something Stanislavski termed the magic what if, which is basically just like you're you. Imagine you're in this made up situation. How would you react? How would you feel? So I do a lot of that. Um, and then sometimes if I, create a fully realized character, I can then begin to imagine how that character feels about how this is going, how that character would react to the situation. There's a great example in the show of the best friend character. Originally, that would have been Charlotte Lucas in the
Yeah.
book, and in our show, we named him Luke Charlton.
Okay.
Uh, so he moves to Nashville and takes up basically married life as the domestic component of there,
Mhm.
because that's the only opportunity he feels like he has. And so then he sings a song called Through the Glass, where he's basically just describing his domestic duties and, the humdrum activity of life, and just that the subtextual feeling that all his choices are made. He's been put into a glass box and he's just watching the world go by from here on out.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I, while I had the experience of getting married and fulfilling certain domestic duties in our
Just
home,
recently, by the way, congratulations.
thank you, doing things that are described in the show, like buying groceries and folding laundry, I then, expanded that to include like not having a sense of purpose or not being in a marriage that's founded in love. And just like, where would that take me lyrically? What might seep into the music at that point? So Luke ends up singing a lyric almost out of nowhere that just says, "Can anybody really say what love is? It can't keep the rain off. It won't light a cigarette. It's like the howl of a coyote on the mountain, cutting through the glass till the moonlight has been spent."
I like that.
And
I
that was
like
just
that.
pure
I
imagination on
like
my
that.
part.
I like that. Well, this all sounds really intriguing, and I'm looking forward to doing this. I really, the minute that I heard about this project, the lights just went off, and I went, "That's a winner." That is.
It surprised me how much that idea of a modernized Pride and Prejudice, especially when you gender swap it, how
Yeah.
easily that fit into this current moment in American society.
Yeah. I know that you have a couple of songs that I have heard already, and one of them I may get the names wrong, but one of them is Born with the Broken Heart. Is that right?
Yes.
Are you going to record a single with any of these, or do something with these as far as recording these?
So I'm in a local folk band called Gully Washer.
Uh-huh.
And my band leader, Chris Hudson, and I, we a year or two back, we put together kind of a side project we called the Bard Owls,
Uh-huh.
which we conceive of as just kind of like an incubator for new songs, new ideas, maybe different sounds that we want to try out.
Uh-huh.
And then some of those sounds then make it over to the Gully Washer, or some of them break off and become a Bard Owls album.
Uh-huh.
For instance, Chris just released a new solo album called The Easing as
Uh-huh.
Chris Hudson and the Bard Owls. Another example is one of the songs that became kind of a cornerstone of American Pride. It's called Eastward Facing Road.
Uh-huh.
That appears as one of the tracks on the last Gully Washer album, which is called Holding the Dawning.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
So
and
that's kind of like slowly coming out in different areas. Okay.
So my big plan, though, is I want to get a crew together of people who have worked on the show or will commit to learning the music. And we want to go into a real live studio and just record kind of studio band versions of every song
Uh-huh.
in the show.
Just like your
Um,
traditional soundtrack albums, basically.
A little bit, yeah, kind of give a flavor of that performance. But yeah, when I wrote the music originally, I kind of had the ideas like, well, if I could just put all these songs in order on an album, would you still get the sense of what the story was?
Uh-huh.
So we're going to create that album and see what happens.
Looking forward to it. That's you'll have to get back with us on that. Um, all right, Sam. Well, let's talk a little bit about your musical history. When did you start playing?
I did a little, a cappella choir in high school, but I think I was in December of my senior year of high school. I walked by the window of a music store and I saw an acoustic guitar in the window, and I just thought to myself, well, that's the one. I gotta learn how to play guitar now.
Uh-huh.
So
What guitar was it?
it was a black Ibanez, standard acoustic, not even a pickup built in or anything.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
On the cheaper end of things, which was good for me,
Uh-huh.
So I just picked that up and I started tooling around, and I started learning by just trying to play songs I already knew.
Uh-huh.
And when that became too difficult, I just started making up songs that I could also play.
All right. All right.
And yeah, that was.
So your songwriting goes back, it sounds like, then to your teen years.
Yeah, that's fair to say. I think my first ever attempt at writing a song was around that same period. I had a friend whose mom died in a bicycling accident.
Oh, yeah.
And I could tell that they were not processing what had happened.
Mhm.
And maybe it was presumptuous of me, but I went ahead and wrote them a song to kind of encapsulate what they might be feeling and just kind of put it out there in the world for them.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I got started. So I guess I've always been writing in character and always been writing for other people
Uh-huh.
to express.
Uh-huh. Well, that's interesting that's one of the things that you remember. And do you find that a lot of people come up to you at times and tell you that, oh, that song, there was something in that really it touched me, it hit a chord or something like that? Do you run across?
That's happened a lot lately with Eastward Facing Road.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Whether we play it at a Gully Washer show or somebody says, I was just listening to the album, but I'm hearing that a lot lately. So that's interesting.
That's a good feeling, isn't it? It's hard sometimes we think that what we're doing may be a little bit arcane. It may be out there and maybe people aren't grasping onto it. So it's nice when you get that feeling. I know, especially if you're going to be doing things like writing plays where you want to think that you're touching on what, something of the zeitgeist, that's out there.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you create a piece of art, often in solitude. You sit there, working sometimes months, years at a time, thinking, "Wow, will any of this work? Will will anybody understand what I'm going for here?" And it's not until you put it in front of people and feel their reactions in real time that you understand what you've got.
Uh-huh. Well, I want you to tell me a little bit about your education. Have you studied music formally? Have you studied drama formally?
I have not studied music formally at
Uh-huh.
all.
You're just a
uh,
folkie like me.
yeah, I in fact, I just picked up a basically a basic music theory book at a used bookstore, so I could basically learn the notation I need to write down what I've created for this
Uh-huh.
musical.
Yeah.
So I'm beginning that study now. Now that I've written a show.
Oh, golly. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I was a bad piano student. I was a bad cello student, all that, and I still I want to do it by ear, and I don't want to have to mess with those things like chord charts or anything else. And but at some point, you just have to realize, okay, if I'm really going to create this, I'm going to have to learn how to. Especially with a play, you're going to have to communicate that to other people if they want to
Yeah,
put
yeah.
a play on.
Can't just do it all yourself, is what I've
Yeah,
learned.
yeah.
I
Um,
did formally study theater, though.
uh-huh. And where did
I
you
have a
study that?
bachelor's degree in theater from Emporia State University.
Oh, okay, okay. And you work. I think I know this now, just because we have mutual friends. You work at young audiences and have for quite a while.
Kansas City Young Audiences, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And what do you do there?
I'm in a show called the Kansas Settlers Band. We basically created a 45 minutes lesson in the cultural history of Kansas. And we borrowed old public domain folk music to weave into it on each of the parts of that history lesson.
Uh-huh.
And we go into grade schools and perform that principally for the fourth grade class. Sadly, we haven't done that show in
I bet
18
you have.
months for obvious reasons.
Yeah. And I was doing my, little journalist research before we talked today. And one of the things that you really made a splash with was back in 2016, you were in a one man play about Crazy Horse. And it looks like you got best of venue at the KC Fringe Festival, and also played at some different Fringe festivals, including the Hollywood Fringe Festival. Really had some fantastic reviews there. Tell us a little bit about that.
Um, let's see. In 2015, this guy named Nicholas Collett from Hastings, England, came to Kansas City to perform a one-man show about Admiral Lord Nelson. And he actually had a whole company of other Brits with him who had their own 1 and 2 person shows up and running for a week or two. And I got to see a few of them. And I think I said to him after the show, I was like, man, I have been reading a lot about the Lakota chief Crazy Horse, and it's such an important story. People need to hear this, but I have never before figured out how could that possibly be staged until I saw what you did with this, amazing story about epic naval battles. So like, and off of that comment, he said immediately, oh, well, then you should write that show and then you should bring it to England.
Uh-huh.
So I called his bluff, and I did write the show, and then I just showed up in the south of England, and we,
Now, that was in Brighton, is that correct?
Yes, the Brighton Fringe Festival there. So I did 3 performances of that. And that was the very first kind of iteration of that show. And then I brought it back to Kansas City and did it at Kansas City Fringe in 2016. Then in 2017, I took this show back overseas and did it at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. And that was its biggest run. I think there were 22 shows over the course of that month.
Oh, wow. Wow.
That's
such a fun festival. I bet you really enjoyed being part of that.
It is quite the circus. And, you know, it was a big stretch for me, like using every resource I could possibly gather to get it there, to get it done. Learned a lot through that process about producing. And then, you know, I've done a couple of runs of it elsewhere. I did a single performance up in Gladstone at the Atkins Johnson Farm and Museum.
Oh, okay.
I did a short run at the upstairs reading room in Prospero's Books, 39th and Bell. And then I took it to Hollywood Fringe and did it there as well. It's kind of taking a back seat right now as I'm working on this show, and there'll be plenty to do in the near future on American Pride, I'm sure.
Yeah. You have a background, you are an Indigenous American, is that correct?
Yes, my family has told me that I have some Cherokee background. And I've been looking at the records, and I think I've narrowed down who it was, although the records are scant at that period. My grandfather's grandmother.
Oh, okay. Okay. So not too far back. Not too
far
back.
Now that things are starting to open up again, I'm hoping to get over to the Midwest Genealogy Center and find some more records about it.
Interesting. But man, so did that inform part of your interest in doing Crazy Horse? Just having that.
It was actually the other way around. I went to the Black Hills of South Dakota to perform in a show at the Black Hills Playhouse in 2009. And while we were there, there's not a lot to do out there in the Black Hills. So we went and visited the Crazy Horse Memorial. And they're carving the entire mountain into the likeness of this guy on a horse. And I was just stunned. I was like, they've been working on it over 80 years so far. And I was like, why this guy? I have to know. So I started picking up books. Luckily, the first books I grabbed were by Lakota writers. And I got a certain foundation in who Crazy Horse was and why he was so important. And I don't know, it was kind of like the spirit of Crazy Horse followed me back to Kansas City and just kind of wouldn't leave me alone. I just kept reading about it and imagining how you could tell this story theatrically until the moment happened. I found myself in a position where I was this mostly white person who looks a little bit native, and Crazy Horse was this mostly native person who looks a little bit white. It was a nice little conjunction there. And every time I do the show, actually, I try to be really open and expansive, and if you want to get a little woo-woo about it, give the spirit of Crazy Horse a chance to speak through me.
You are thinking about taking this one overseas to some Fringe festivals as well.
Yeah, the director for American Pride is Nicholas Collett as well. And of course, you know, it was his wife's idea. So we are bound and determined to get this production over to Edinburgh Fringe once again, after we do a preview run here in Kansas City. It will take a massive sort of fundraising effort. So anybody who's watching this, like, come find me.
Any people, whatever you're watching today. Okay.
We're gonna pass the hat all around the city to try to make that happen. I want this show to be a showcase of, you know, American theater, but also just like the high caliber Kansas City theater artists
Uh-huh.
who are
And
here.
tell me a little bit about the people that you have enlisted to help you with this.
Yeah. We had some very talented local performers who agreed to get up and read the show. Um, Kate Gilchrist, Bob Linebarger, Stephanie Stevens, who did an amazing turn at not one, but two characters in the piece. Tim Elanius as Papa Longborn, Margaret Shelby. Like these were all just delightful people. Jake Gollier did an amazing turn as Lyle Longborn. We
Uh-huh.
had Nicole Scott as our Darcy Fitzwilliams, and Christian Owen as Jake Longborn. And man, I feel like I'm forgetting someone in that. Well, everybody who was part of the show did a really good job, and I was very pleased with their efforts. I know not all of them will be able to come over and
Well, that's what
perform
I was
for a month
wondering. Yeah.
in Scotland.
Yeah.
It's a
I was
big
wondering if
ask,
you could take. Will you end
but
up getting some people over there then, Sam? Will you have to get some Scots involved or
I'm open to the idea of getting Scots involved, but I really would like to have a full American company that we tour
uh-huh.
over.
Yeah.
Um, if but only for the fact that you don't have to switch out parts. Like everyone can grow together, and you're sure everybody
Yeah,
knows what they're doing before you leave.
certainly. Well, Sam, we have a lot of songwriters in our organization. And do you have any hints for people that are maybe interested in have an idea and I've never done writing for a musical before. Someone like if someone were to say to you, boy, I'd really like to do a one woman show or a one man show of my life story, or I'd like to take this play, this Tennessee Williams play and turn it in, what would you say to them? What are some of the hints that you'd give them after your experience?
So as a still a fairly young playwright, I decided that there are two basic things you absolutely have to establish right at the beginning when you write something. And the first thing is you have to establish the character's need to tell whatever story it is you're trying to tell. And the
Mhm.
second thing you have to establish is the audience's desire to hear that story. And so likewise, when you're writing music for theatrical purposes, you have to establish the character's need to sing that song in that moment. And you have to cultivate the audience's desire to hear them sing that song in that moment. I remember being a kid over at my grandma's house in central Kansas, and she would, go rent Betamax from the local library of The Music Man or My Fair Lady or Hello Dolly. And maybe it was my short attention span as a kid, but I remember listening to some of these songs and going, man, just get on with the story. Uh, as a songwriter for musicals, you have to avoid that. If
Uh-huh.
if your song does not advance the story, does not offer key information or help a character advance what it is they're going after, then you should probably cut that and write something else.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That's interesting. When I was in a lot of plays, a lot of musicals when I was a kid, and I used to perform them. I was very young, and then I played bass and cello when I was older. And I remember that thinking, there's always a love song in the second act, near the beginning of the second act, that bores the shit out of me. There's always that one song that just like, I don't need this song. It's like, and I can remember sitting in the orchestra pit going, oh, here comes that song, that boring song. I know exactly what you're talking about, not advancing the story. It's like, oh, this would be a really good vehicle for Shirley Jones voice is the idea rather than the
Yeah.
character.
You start
yes.
thinking about the commercial concerns and the performer's abilities, and art lives in a commercial world, so you have to throw some bones to those sort of concerns, but at its core you have to establish those two things.
Uh-huh. Well, really excited to see this. I'm really glad that you could be here with us today. I want to, just for our listeners, give a couple plugs for some things that I know you're doing, because it's with Heartland Song Network. Sam will be one of our guests on a first time ever. We're going to have a on the air song swap for Heartland Song Network, and that will be on the 21st. And Sam and Leah Spruill, and I can't announce the last person yet. I think I know who it is, but I'm not 100% certain.
Surprise guest.
Yeah, a surprise guest. So there'll be 3 songwriters, and then Sam will also be playing for Heartland Song Network at our Wheel of Fate day on October 30th. At that's from 2 to 4 at Mike Kelly's West Sider. And then, as Sam mentioned earlier, he has 2 recent projects that are out and that are available on Bandcamp. Is that right, Sam?
Yes.
Holding the Dawning by Goalie Washer, which Sam is a principal in, and then the Barred Owls, which just this last week came out with their new CD, The Easing, and both of those are available on Bandcamp. And you can, according to Sam, you can hear some of his American Pride songs on there. Sam, thanks so much for being with us, and looking forward to hearing you on the 21st on KKFI.
Well, it was a pleasure to talk with you. I'm deeply honored to be counted among the songwriters in Kansas City.
Turning ashes into feathers, making wings materialize. Hope will set your house on fire, but it will guide you by